Allora, are you living a good life? È una domanda che ci poniamo tutti, naturalmente. Ma ecco, partendo da questa dimensione, quella individuale e privata, però io invece poi volevo passare a quella istituzionale e anche un po' di visione di lungo periodo. E quindi volevo subito chiedere a Vaira Vike-Freiberga, che è l'ex Presidente della Repubblica eletto e nonché Vicepresidente del Gruppo di Riflessione sul Futuro dell'Europa 2020-2030, di raccontarci un po' questo grande lavoro che sotto la guida di Felipe González stanno facendo per provare a darsi anche degli obiettivi di lungo periodo. Spesso la politica si imputa di non essere capace di guardare lontano, in questo caso siete un gruppo di persone, tutte di altissimo profilo istituzionale, e state lavorando sulla visione di un'Europa del futuro. In questo momento, dopo la crisi economica, tra l'altro, in cui il modello economico e sociale europeo è stato messo a dura prova dalla crisi, in cui ci sono i paesi emergenti che arrivano con modelli nuovi, diciamo, sulla scena politica internazionale, qual è il futuro dell'Europa che state disegnando e quali sono i punti su cui state lavorando in questo momento, Mrs. Freiberga?
Thank you for this opportunity to share with you the reflections that a group of more or less arbitrarily selected 12 persons from across the European Union had the privilege of engaging in, thanks to a mandate given to us by the Council of Europe. I must say that when we were selected, Europe looked rather different in December 2007 than it did even a year later. Originally, we were asked to sort of take our time with completing the group after the chairman and two vice chairmen had been named, for fear that such a group starting too actively engaging in debates might endanger the ratification of the Lisbon Treaty. That turned out to be a futile concern because the Lisbon Treaty had the ups and downs that we all know, and which had very little to do, indeed nothing, with the existence or not of such a group. However, the delay gave us a chance to see something else happening when ultimately the Lisbon Treaty was ratified. And one of the mandates that the group was given is, please leave institutional questions alone. Whatever you do in thinking about the future of Europe, do not think in terms of changes to those structures that the Lisbon Treaty has now endowed us with. We have to work with those for a while, so accept them as they are and see what can be done with them in place. But when the group was created, we did not have either the world financial crisis or the severe economic recession that hit one country and after in such a short period of time. So it gives us a chance to realize that when you are thinking long term for a period of, say, several decades into the future, sometimes it can be a matter of months and of years before new factors come into play that nobody truly was anticipating in such a form before. When the group was first conceived by the Council of Europe, nobody was thinking in terms of this crisis and its consequences. The group is not a political one. The members of the group did not represent any particular country, although there was one per country chosen. We spoke as individuals, we debated as individuals, we consulted largely, we argued, we worked very hard on every word and sentence of our report. You can get it on the internet, you can get it in hard copy in the 24 official languages of the European Union, and all of us in the group very much hope that many of you will find the time to read it. We set ourselves the goal of making it as brief and punchy as possible in the hope that as many people as possible would read it, not just the heads of state and government, and that it would be cause for debate and reflection for others. We heard already from Mrs. Benita Ferrero-Waldner about the difficulty of politicians, well known, of thinking long term and of taking decisions that may cost them their office and frequently does. We had the luxury, only a few of us being former politicians, we had the luxury of thinking very much long term and then suggesting that heads of state and government try and think in that way in spite of the dangers, of course, that they face every day in their political life and especially at time of the elections. In a very few words, what were our conclusions? We did not want to be 12 prophets of doom saying how Europe is just going to the dogs. And nor did we want to be very naive in our Pollyannish optimism about the future. We tried to strike a balance between the two, and essentially in 2 words we said, if Europe continues down the path it is today with the very same structures and habits of mind and of action and of proceeding and of political will or lack of it, then indeed it will become irrelevant very shortly, and it will not even take 20 years to do it. It will happen much sooner than that. The reasons for it are many. You have already heard a number of them enumerated here today. We can go back to them later in the discussion period, but the fact is, I think, unavoidable. Europe is going to become irrelevant unless it pulls itself together and pools the resources that are at its disposal, even this very moment as we speak, but are not being used in the most efficient way. And that is, I think, the main conclusion of our group, that Europe has a fantastic potential. It has a fantastic series of achievements behind it that are the envy of much of the rest of the world. But if it rests on its laurels, it will wear them in the wrong place, and it will risk losing these laurels altogether in a very short time indeed. What that means is that there has to be much more coordination and collaboration in elaborating such things as a common foreign policy. And again, my friend Benita well knows about the pitfalls of that. We need having a common security and defense policy and much more collaboration in procurement, in the building up of our defense forces, in our deployability to hotspots across the world where Europe wishes to intervene and feels it has a moral or otherwise duty to do so. We have to collaborate on a common energy policy, on its distribution and on its provision. And most of all, of course, Europe has to worry about maintaining the acquis that it has, and that means the social economic model that it is so proud of. Growth, development, prosperity for ever-increasing numbers of people, but at the same time with a deep concern with the least favored in the population. In other words, a model, not a unique model, not one size fits all, with obviously differences between the north and the south and the east and the west of Europe, particularly between the countries that are from the former communist area of Europe, of course, which have a lot of catching up to do. And yet, this model will have to introduce in the future the idea of sustainability, and we put great emphasis on sustainability, the role of the Europeans in seeing and moving forward the agenda for dealing with climate change. We took note, as of course did everybody else, of the grim failure of the Europeans to get their agenda forward at the Copenhagen conference. It was a great disappointment to us all, but also a bitter lesson as how not to go about doing things.